Okay, I'd like to call our meeting to order. And just remind everyone, this is the Town of Southington Board of Finance meeting. It's February 12th, 2025, and we'll stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, we'll do a roll call, please.
Mr. Lebenik?
Here.
Mr. Pocock?
He's here. He's here. He just went out to his car. He was here a moment ago.
Okay. Mr. Bedoin?
Here.
Ms. Mazzarella? Here. Mr. Stanford?
Here.
Chair Leary?
Here.
Yeah.
Okay, the first thing on our agenda is to get a presentation of the Board of Ed's 2025-2026 budget. For those watching, the fiscal year starts July 1, ends June 30th. So when you say the 2025-2026, it's the budget that's going to begin in the summertime and go to the following year. For us on the Board of Finance, this is the first piece of the budget we're talking about this year. We've not received the general government budget yet. So this is how it normally works. We start with an overview of where the Board of Education's coming in. So for anybody following the process, what has happened is within the Board of Education, all of the schools, the special departments have all reported their budget up to the superintendent. The superintendent put that budget together. Likely, I can't speak for him, but likely decided what was urgent and important and left in what he could and probably left out a lot. And then that budget goes to the Board of Education, where the elected Board of Education gets hold of it. They've had a couple of workshops on it, asked questions, looked at it, did their own research, and then they, the Board of Education, come tonight and present that budget to us and say to the Board of Finance, this is the budget you're going to see when the budget book for the town is prepared. This is the Board of Education budget you're going to see. And it's a chance for us to begin to ask questions and have our first look at it. So without going on, let's have the Board of Education present their 2025-2026 budget. And we have Mrs. Millett here. We have Chair of the Board of Education with us, Colleen Clark, and we have the Superintendent of Schools, Mr. Medancy, and there's other folks out in the audience who could be called upon for some assistance in presenting the budget. So we're just going to slide to the side and watch the presentation.
Go ahead, you go first.
We could shut. Yeah, we could hit. Yeah, pull your microphone in closer. See if it happens. See if it works. If it doesn't, grab the other one. There's one that doesn't work and it moves.
And I probably got it. I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to be here. I'd also like to thank you all, the members of the Board of Finance, who were able to come to both of our workshops, to our meetings, to hear what we are proposing for the 25-26 budget. This was not an easy budget, as you all know. I would like to also publicly say thank you to our staff and administration for the work that they did. My fellow board members and I pored over this budget looking for, potential savings, and honestly, we did not find anything other than the work that was done by our staff. So we present this budget to you tonight. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Medancy so he can go into detail about it, but I thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So as we head into tonight's budget presentation, I just want to highlight kind of the flow of how the presentation will go for you. Obviously, we understand the purpose. That's a standing tradition we have with all of you, bringing you this budget and then engaging in dialogue with you and answering any questions you may have. But I think the flow of the presentation is important. we always want to reflect on who we are, what makes up our student population, and what do we value as a community. I think it's in some historical context is important. Giving you an overview of the budget process in terms of where it started and what the numbers actually looked like at the start versus what they ended up being. An overview analysis, so I think, different from years past, I also tried to provide some information relative to state and federal funding that are, kind of going to be competing with the local interest against how we can fund this budget, and then some timelines that we're all familiar with relative, more so for the public relative to the budget process. So when we talk about who we are and what we value, this is not new for all of you. This is something that the district adopted back in 2017. It was a group of stakeholders that was made up of teachers, parents, administrators, students, elected officials, appointed officials, and community members. And this is really the North Star for us in everything we do. For example, at the high school right now, as we try to build out our career pathways opportunities for students with experiential learning opportunities, we look at how much exposure will they get to many of these 21st century skills, or if we're even talking about content mastery, the knowledge that they need to be workforce ready upon graduation from our schools. Our total student population this year is 6,161 students. That's pretty much right around where it traditionally has held, plus or minus 40 to 50 students each year on any given year. One thing I often talk about with that student population, and I'll give you a pretty simple example. 2 years ago, we went from 6,242 students to 6,200 students. So somebody said, well, you have 42 less students. That should be 2 less teachers. We operate 388 classrooms at capacity on every single day. When every school is in session and every grade level is in session and all courses are operating in the high school, we have 388 classrooms. So 42 students doesn't even put a dent in your class sizes or your per pupil allocation, if you will. What is the makeup of our student population? So that's basically, these are state data that we pulled off just to share with you in terms of what our statistics are. That's the percent of diversity. You can see the Hispanic Latino population speaks a lot to the multilingual learner increases that we've experienced in the past few years and we've talked about in past budgets. Our students with disabilities is pretty much right in line with the current state average. And the multilingual learners, although low when you compare it to the state of Connecticut, it has actually increased in Southington considerably over the past couple of years. When we talk about our vision of a graduate, one important thing that we want to talk about as well is when we think about post-COVID and where are the students now, this group of students, one important metric for us is the chronic absenteeism rate, because it talks about the social, emotional, mental health needs of students. And as you can see in 2021, but pretty much it was very low, but that's because how were we taking attendance during COVID when schools were closed, right? It was kind of hard to do in terms of who was on their screen, who wasn't. But if you even look at the 3-year average prior to COVID, and then you look at the 3-year average post-COVID, you can see it's considerably higher. So that's demonstrative of students with social emotional needs, mental health needs. It might be school avoidance, it might be anxiety, could be depression. We understand that a lot of teenagers were very isolated during COVID to social media, cell phones, things like that. We're still trying to draw those students back in, but you can see the last 3-year average, the positive is those numbers are starting to recover and trend in a better direction in terms of towards the pre-COVID numbers. These numbers are exponentially better than the state average. So that's something to point out, as much as it is still an area of concern for us as a district. And we try to do a lot, whether it's home visits, working with youth services and holding truancy meetings and bringing families in and figuring out ways to support them. Historical context, the next part of our presentation, as we've talked about, I know people don't necessarily love these numbers because it's very hard to derive what does this number mean, what goes into it. But I will say, regardless of whether you agree with the formula, the same formula is applied to every district and every community to determine, what they consider to be the bottom line. I would agree with most people in terms of it's very hard to understand what makes up this number. Another thing that's important to realize is sometimes the larger your district, the lower your per pupil allocation. And so that's just something we've got to be upfront about. The smaller districts tend to have much higher per pupil allocations, which would make sense because obviously there's a higher operating cost when you have less students coming into the district and you're trying to maintain your system. Again, historical context, I think we've started to move the needle for sure in the past couple fiscal years. You can see 23, 24, and 24, 25. That really has helped us, and that's kind of, if that didn't happen, I would be afraid to bring you tonight's budget in terms of some of the recovery we had from some of the COVID years when it was very difficult to pass on an increase to the community when everybody was suffering from COVID effects in terms of unemployment, inflation, and all of those various factors that we had to be conscious of. The roadmap is very familiar to all of you, but the most important part for me is it seems like it's only a month into the new school year, and we begin our budget preparation process for the following school year. And so we've held several meetings up to this point, and as you can see on February 5th, the day the governor proposed his budget, the Board of Ed adopted my proposed budget. I'm proud. This year it was a unanimous vote. I think everybody saw the challenges associated with this budget, and all were in agreement that we did the best we could with some of the challenging factors that we're facing relative to this budget season. Another important factor, and I'm appreciative that the board has waited, and I appreciate the town manager's patience because I know he relies on these numbers to develop his budget, but we want to make sure that when the governor proposes his budget, there's nothing in there that would stick out as a large unfunded mandate that we might not be prepared for. So while there wasn't the amount of relief I would have hoped for in the governor's budget, there doesn't seem to be any large unfunded mandates that would catch us off guard. Because as we know, that budget is not adopted by the state until after our budget season is over. So we want to always try and anticipate if we can. The dates that we meet, Mr. Larry touched upon that. There's a lot of folks that have a part in the development of the budget process. We start with, the building principals, at the building level essentially, and department heads. We move on to central office, and then ultimately it becomes my budget along with Mrs. Mellett and Mr. Pepe, and we end up having to make the decisions we have to make for the reasons that we make them. This is an important slide for all of you this year because it's something I think that probably will alleviate a lot of the questions that we often speak to during the budget workshops. How did you arrive at this number, compared to where you started? In your budget books, I have prepared, after my cover letter, there are 2 pages that summarize all of these cuts for you. So this isn't something you have to remember. It's already in your book. But all requests for new personnel. So, that was about $1.5 million. We ended up, with the exception of 2 middle school, actually it's 2.5 middle school staff that we need as part of our shift to a new schedule at the middle school. But I will say it would have been 6 staff had we not made that shift. Now I'll also say we didn't make that shift, for the savings of requesting staff. We made that shift because we believe instructionally it's going to be of a benefit to our students because they're going to get more core instruction in math, ELA, social studies, and science. And we felt, given student performance, that was an important shift to make. A byproduct of that was the benefit of only needing 2 staff members to make that shift because a lot of the other staff members that are associated with the current schedule, those FTEs were reallocated to make that entire shift possible. So what could have been a lot more staff was not. All major projects and equipment, and you'll see at the end of my budget presentation, I hope to entertain another conversation with the Board of Finance this year, similar to what we did last year. It doesn't make sense to annualize one-time costs into an operating budget and compound that year over year. So I eliminated them all with the hopes that we could engage in a conversation about one-time funding opportunities for some of the requests that would have been in the budget had I not removed them. Again, my goal is looking at 9.85, I can't stay there. That's not a responsible budget to bring forward to the community, so where are the opportunities? The 5 non-certified positions we eliminated. Those are positions that, yes, could we use them? Yes, but they're positions that if we look at where's the least impact to students, if we eliminate them, we landed within those positions. The adjusted minimum excess cost, this was a bit of a gamble. Mrs. Mellett rightfully budgeted at 60%. What that means is we would get 60% of what we're entitled to from the state in excess cost funding. She came upon that number because although traditionally we've gotten much higher, we got 76% 2 years ago, we got 67% last year. This year we only got 62%. So she felt like to anticipate a low number because that's basically what's been trending. I made a little bit of a calculated risk. There are 17 bills at the state right now proposing fixing the excess cost reimbursement formula. And in my conversations with legislators on both sides, there's a strong desire to try and rectify the shortage that communities are facing relative to reimbursements. So I had her move it up to 65%, which I think is still a somewhat conservative number, but certainly a little bit of a gamble. The summer school, we traditionally were able to fund that with ARP ESSER funds. I just basically I proposed this last year as part of my budget as well, but the board at that time said it's not something we can sustain, and so, there was a decision to remove that from my proposed budget last year. So basically, knowing I still need to reduce from the 9.85%, I made that reduction knowing that that was a board action made last year when we tried to get to a budget number. The transportation line item, we made a decision, Mr. Leary, I know we have this conversation, to reduce by 3 buses. A bit of a calculated risk again, but we think, given our current bus number that we're running and the new contract and the cost of those buses, that could net us the savings there relative to transportation. The telephone line budget, we were able to reduce 4 teachers to Nexus funding. So those are teachers that traditionally are paid for by tuitions that are charges that we pass on to districts where maybe, let's say, a student from Hartford is getting special education services. We bill back Hartford for all those services. The monies that we get for those services, we use to pay for the staff. It's not sound operating practice to fund operating staff positions with essentially an unknown, we don't know what we're charging Hartford next year because we don't know what services we'll be providing to those students. So again, it's a risk, but it's the same risk we took this year as part of last year's budget proposal. So we left those students in the Nexus funding, hoping that the Hartford tuitions would help to offset the costs that were associated with those 4 FTEs. We reduced some of our software. We reduced equipment, anticipated taxes. The para-PD hours, that was an unfunded mandate that came to us last year that we now had built into the budget, so we were able to reduce that amount. We had 1 vacant board-certified behavior analyst. It kind of killed me to eliminate this position because they're pretty crucial in terms of the services they provide to our staff and supporting staff with our most difficult students who might be suffering from social-emotional needs or mental health needs. Behavioral needs. They're really field experts in student behavior, and they help guide our teachers. But again, it was a vacant position, so I took that opportunity and savings and reduced that position. And then our school supply lines, it's such a small number that there's not, even if you cut a large percentage, it doesn't move the needle all that much, especially when you're talking about a $123 million budget. So as you can see, from 9.85 to 6.6, while it may look like there was a lot of reductions made, when you're dealing with a large budget number, it's really hard to move the needle substantively because you're just dealing with percentages that are so much at a scale, so much larger than the individual costs associated with doing business. Some of what you have in your summary, you can see, and these are typical drivers of our budgets, but these are the 3 main drivers. I won't necessarily read them to you or speak to you because I'm going to go into a little bit more depth here shortly on each. The contracts that we just settled into, the certified staff, that's an important number. I want to point out the increase there. That is the largest employee bargaining unit that we have. Certified staff is our administrators and teachers. Everybody else who's considered non-certified would be paraeducators, secretaries, food service, custodial, maintenance, technology staff, substitute teachers, things like that. So the certified, and we talked about this, I came to a Board of Finance meeting earlier in the year, that teacher's contract was very important to us for a lot of reasons. When obviously you saw the climate around settlements going into negotiations and where they were landing, we saw where Southington fared compared to Hartford County districts that we compete against, especially in the shortage areas. And so it's not so much just about the raises, it's about being able to recruit staff and retain staff, because we are now at an area where you have more vacancies than you have teachers. And when you have that problem in shortage areas, teachers shop, and they're able to go where they want to go based on who's willing to pay. So we needed to make up some ground for years of freezes that we had built into teachers' contracts. Going back to about 2007, we looked. And it just put us in at a disadvantage against many districts who did not have freezes built into their contracts over time. So why that served us well over those years, that's when there wasn't a teacher shortage. That came home to roost now with the teacher shortage. In addition, we were able to give language to the teachers that there is a cost associated with it. And one simple example, when you talk about retaining staff, our elementary school teachers in Southington do not have a preparation period every day, which means one period where they're able to develop their lesson plans, return phone calls to parents, answer emails, use the restroom, whatever they need to do. That one, divided time. Our middle school teachers and our high school teachers did and always have. The elementary never did. That's unheard of in a school district. Two other districts I've been in that did not occur, but I can't find one. I couldn't tell you one that doesn't occur. When you want to talk about teacher retention, if you're an elementary teacher, you're going to go to a district where that is part of the language and you are provided that time daily. To provide that time to teachers, you have to find out where are the kids going to go during that time because they're not with the teacher during that time. So we developed a rotation of health education that the students will have in conjunction with physical education to provide that extra education for the students and at the same time provide the preparation period for teachers. So I go a little bit into the weeds there, but I think it's just important to know that even though that will cost me 5 teachers, I have to come up with 5 teachers, there are not 5 teachers requested in this budget to make that happen. Every opportunity I can, I try to utilize existing staff and reallocate FTEs when there's a need. And so that's an example that we're going to be able to give those teachers a preparation period by adding 5 health teachers, and they're not part of this budget request. Health insurance, I know you've had many conversations. Mr. Lebenek's an expert in this field. It's right now, it's an area of concern. I think everybody would agree. Controlling costs is a challenge associated with benefits. Student transportation. So one of the things that we had this year was a new transportation contract. And so we went out to bid. We had some interest. We're a pretty large district, so a lot of the smaller companies couldn't compete or provide the services that we would need at the scale we would need them. And so what we ended up with was 2 bids. One bid was not substantially higher, but a couple, $200,000 to $300,000 higher a year over the awarded bid of New Britain Transportation. And so while they may have provided some services that might have been more appealing to the district, the cost just wasn't something that we could absorb at this point in time, given the financial climate around all the other competing factors in our budget. Special education. This is a slide I want to highlight because I think it's something the district does very well. It's almost unheard of to see a slide in any superintendent's budget where your outplaced tuition budgeted number would actually be going down. It goes up every year, and what you're seeing right now at the state is districts pleading for the state to pass legislation to put a rate cap on outplaced tuition because the outplaced institutions get to set their own rates. And you're very vulnerable when it comes to the market because if they have a limited amount of seats for students with very significant needs, it becomes a supply and demand issue. And that's where I think districts every year are struggling with their budgets because that's a very unpredictable and unstable number that you won't get until after your budget's been passed. And then you have to figure out where you can offset those increases. As I talk about special education, I think it's important to note when you compare it to our regular education, we do actually a very good job at holding the line with regular education. But unfortunately, that sometimes makes it difficult to innovate as well because we have to hold the line given the requirement to provide special education services to students in the best way that we can. And so when you looked at that previous slide and saw the decrease, it's because we've done such a good job building our continuum of services in Southington. So where you see added FTEs, it's because we're creating in-district programs at a better cost, a better quality, and more predictable rate in terms of year-over-year budgeting and what would it cost. But the most important part is we're able to educate our students in their own communities when possible. It's not always possible. Sometimes the needs of the student outweigh the programs that we have for them. And that's when a student, rightfully, if they need those services, we do outplace them. But it is something I think our continuum of services is something we're proud of. I've really lobbied hard at the state. There is a proposed bill right now that I hope I got a fairly strong chance that for all in-district programs, they changed the formula, which I don't want to go into the weeds on the formula with you, but if they change the formula the way that I've lobbied for and the way it is proposed right now, it would increase the amount of eligible reimbursement costs the district can get for having kids in district programs versus outplacing them. Essentially incentivizing, like, if you're able to do this, because right now the way it currently works, we don't reach the state threshold for reimbursement, and so the local tax base picks up the entire cost because the threshold is so high to be eligible for reimbursement. So I said they need to reduce that threshold for in-district programs and reward districts that are doing a good job keeping kids in district and providing quality services. The high drivers of our budget, these are not surprises to you, but I think it's just important to see the actual data associated with it, and especially the historical data associated with it. So when you look at year over year, dating back to the past few budgets that we spoke about, salaries are pretty much at the market rate for what you would expect salaries to be right now, even if you were in the corporate world and you were bargaining. What you see our town contracts and bargaining units coming in at. So these are that's not even with the built-in budget of the new contract. We're still at a pretty market-friendly number. The benefits is the one we all touched upon already, right? We can see that that's something that's a major driver, but we have to figure out a way to address at some point in time. The transportation, I think we were a bit lucky that we had a transportation contract that we were locked in at, and instead of going out to bid previously, we just extended that contract and were able to keep that rate, plus a minimal increase that was passed on each year that we extended. We felt it was really important to go out to bid for this contract for many reasons to see if there was a potential for savings, and unfortunately we did not realize that. And I think you're hearing about it across the state. Electricity and oil are driving factors in all budgets across the state. So kind of a more finite view of the salaries relative, the historical number relative to the proposed budget. You can see, what proportion of that, when you look at the total, makes up the regular education and the special education increases. And interestingly enough, if you look at, this is an important slide, because if you look at the monetary difference, if you will, right, from regular ed to special education, and if you look at regular ed of 49 million change, 54 million change, that's for almost 400 staff members. We've increased the same amount for the remaining staff related to special education. Special education staff is a really high driver of salaries because it's not just your certified staff. You have paraeducators, you have applied behavior analysts, you have speech and language pathologists, you have occupational therapists, you have physical therapists, you have school psychologists, and you have social workers. And so a special ed student doesn't get educated by just a teacher. It takes an entire team, and that's where the funding challenges come into play. You can see the percent increase, which is what I just spoke to. Special ed is far outpacing regular ed when we look at the annualized increase. Our benefits, this is not a special ed regular education piece. This is more just kind of a breakdown of the two major drivers of our benefits. We know MERS has been kind of a moving target for several years as well, and it has increased over time. Thankfully, we don't have as many employees in MERS as the town does. Many of our staff, our certified staff, pay into the teacher's retirement system, so we don't have to pay MERS costs associated with them. But all of the non-certified staff that I spoke to earlier are part of the MERS system. And then the health insurance driver, again, the annualized increases, we can see the health insurance is a major driver over time. Electricity, oil, and gas, total amount there. You can see the increases associated with those. And while it's not in this budget, Mrs. Mellon and I did get notice that there is a proposal from Eversource right now to increase delivery costs by 49% next year. And so, what's that? On the gas, delivery, yes. For Eversource, yeah, I didn't say that could be electricity or gas. On gas delivery, of an increase of 49%. That's going through the hearing process right now. If that is passed on to us, that's going to be another portion of the budget that we're going to have to consider at reallocation time. There's the percent increases. Again, you can see the gas. Transportation. We spoke about that extensively already. Much of this has to do with the new contract, but special ed transportation is a really important number not to overlook. I'm going to go into detail a little bit in a slide here or two about the excess cost associated with special ed transportation. It can be, and it is, we have students in district that it costs $100,000 plus a year to transport that one student. Depending on the school they're going to, depending on the type of bus, depending on the type of support on the bus, we have students that are transported with a nurse. We have students that are transported with aides. We have lift buses. We have buses traveling far distances. We will do what we need to do to provide students the services they need, but it comes at a cost. There's the percentage change. Again, you can see it's relative to special education transportation, so that's no different than the staffing costs. And now what are the budget challenges in the fiscal climate? This is a federal number. So this is a number that there was a large story this weekend in the Connecticut Insider. I'm not sure if you saw it. If not, check it out. Southington was talked about extensively as one of the 21 districts that has taken quite a hit in federal funding relative to Title I. And I'd be honest to tell you that superintendent circles right now are talking about federal funding as a whole, because we're very uncertain about what the future of that looks like. But what we know right now is, regardless of what it looks like going forward, we're still enduring reductions year over year. These are reductions we've had to offset through other moves in the budget. And so again, when you see that initial slide of me eliminating things and reducing things and reallocating things, it's to try and offset some of the reductions we have in different grant sources and revenue sources. This slide, if I could ever have an hour of your time, and I wouldn't take it, nor would you want to, but it basically shows there's a state commitment that is on the books. It is law of what we're supposed to get versus what we are getting. And as you can see, we were shorted in fiscal year 22-23 based on what we were eligible for special ed services we provided by $350,000. We're not notified of that shortage until December 31st, 6 months into the fiscal year. So then it's our job to try and figure out how to make up for that shortage that we weren't notified for ahead of time. And I should go back for 1 second. It's the same for Title I. We're not notified until October 1, 4 months into the fiscal year, of the reduction that is being passed on to us. So the excess cost, again, it doubles the year after that, and then it doubles again based on what's projected this year. We're supposed to be receiving 88% of eligible costs based on our community wealth. The number's going down. We've only gotten 62% this year. So that speaks to that one percentage I spoke to earlier that I budgeted at 65%. Mrs. Mellett had it at 60%, and I kind of forced her hand and said, let's play in the middle on this one between what we got last and what we got this year. But again, it's a calculated risk. I've been speaking to whoever would listen about education cost share money. It makes no sense to me that from 2015-16 to 20, I'll just use this year. I won't even go to the projected 2 years. 10 years later, we're getting the same amount of state aid that we got in 2015-16, less $200,000 or so, right? How is that even possible? Like in 26-27, the governor's second year of the budget, we're getting $200,000 less than we got 10 years ago. When our cost of operating a district has increased by, we all know how much, percentage-wise and dollar-wise, how is it that the state share continues to stay the same? And they've changed the formula. They've invested in education cost sharing, but to no benefit to Southington. There was one good year there, 24-25, but even there, I would argue that it's about a $200,000 increase. That's nothing on a $115 million budget. That doesn't move the needle. And so when the budget increases and state funding is flat and federal funding is reducing, the burden falls on the taxpayer. And that's what I keep harping on as I'm working at the state right now, that they've got to fix the ECS formula. There should be an escalator in there. I don't care if it's inflation or if it's cost of living or whatever formula they want to apply to it, but it makes no sense that our funding stays flat while the cost of operating a district increases, and we all know why it increases. It's due to contractual obligations. We can't just decide arbitrarily not to honor those. Sorry, you probably hear my frustration coming through on that one. Lastly, this is the slide I spoke to that I think we worked well together last year with the town manager and the Board of Finance, depending where the opportunities were. These were all requests as part of my budget that I eliminated and figured if the opportunity presents itself at any point, whether through, reallocation or general fund one-time appropriation, these are not built into the contract, and these would allow us potentially to try and purchase some of these things and get some of these projects done without building them into the annualized budget. Important dates, I look forward to meeting, we'll have the public hearing on March 3rd, and then March 26th is when you guys obviously will take your action. In between there, I think we have some opportunities to answer questions for you. I know in the past, we've created a question grid that you could add questions to, so we could anticipate questions that you might have, or if on the evening of the workshops you have a question that we have to go back and look at some information for, you get some historical information, we can go back and insert that into the grid. And I think that might help the council as well, so that if they're looking at, what types of questions or what types of information might help them make an informed decision when it comes time for their budget work as well. That's all I got for you. Any questions, any comments, anything I can speak to for you? I know typically this evening we usually just present the budget and then we wait for the workshops, but if there's anything that you want to give us a head start on, well, we'd be glad to work on it for you.
First, thank you, and Chairwoman Clark, I just want to say we always talk about it, but we do pride ourselves on having a good working relationship, although I'll always remember back when one Board of Finance, Board of Ed member said to us, we have different roles. And the Board of Ed role is to try and provide the best education possible, be as responsible as you can, but focus on education. When stuff comes here, we too have to provide education, but then we're the ones that actually, the first look at total town happens here. What's going on with the grant list? What's going on with other grants? What are all the departmental budgets with Board of Ed in it? What does it do for the taxpayer? How much are taxes going to go up? And each board has its role. Then town council looks higher level than us. We make a recommendation. They look, what are our vision and priorities for the town? Where do we see ourselves 5 years from now, 10 years from now? And where do we see development? What's going on? But one of the common problems we have is that, and I guess we all have it, is that the Board of Ed expenses go up higher than the average wage increase of the average person. So when you look at, people on Social Security or people, I'm not going to focus on one group or another, but most people who work, they may be looking at a 3% a wage increase, compensation increase. But we see these budgets go up, 6%. At some point, that rate of cost escalation isn't matched by the rate of income, and people, I always say, feel the squeeze. They get squeezed. And not to go on and on, but when lately people have been feeling somewhat of a squeeze, but they're using their credit cards. And when I made the presentation to the town council last year, one of the slides was credit card debt was at an all-time high, because people still buy a certain quantity of groceries to feed their families, but that quantity of stuff costs more. And if they generally put it on the credit card, now they're putting more on there. The problem becomes when they try and pay it off and their compensation, their wages, their income hasn't increased, puts a challenge on it. And I guess our board over here, if we make nobody happy, we're doing or get nobody really upset, we're doing a good job. It's not a board that makes people happy, but finding that balance is what we do. So I'll let anybody ask any specific education question, and then I have a couple. And we'll start the grid. We'll commit to, I'll get it set up. I just got to find a new, do we use Google Docs? What do we use? We use SharePoint? Where's a good spot to put it? Just got to find a good home for it where we could all share the document.
Whatever you're comfortable with. We can either use OneDrive, Microsoft,
Okay.
or Google Drive.
Okay, whatever works for council, because we share the question grid with council too, so they don't ask a redundant question. So we'll get that up. I'll just chat with you a little bit and just figure out the best home for it. Then we got to get people permission to the spot, and then we could have a shared document.
I'll have our. Yes, yep, that's in there.
Okay. You know. And Colleen, you mentioned that this, the budget the Board of Ed approved was the same one the superintendent, there were no changes. They just said, we understand it. We feel the same as the superintendent. This is the one that needs to move forward.
If you look at the budget, the document, if you listen to our workshops, everything was line by line, as we always do. And honestly, as the chair, I asked everyone, pull a rabbit out of the hat. I asked each individual board member, see what you can find. Sharpen your pencil, look, see if there's something. Could we postpone something? Could we not do, there's nothing in there that we could find that wouldn't be, I don't want to say do damage, but the fact of the matter is there's nothing in there that we could take out as a board. And as Superintendent Medancy mentioned, it was an 8-0 vote. One of our board members made it into the meeting 2 minutes after the meeting was over, and he said, yes, I'm voting for the budget. So, but at the end of the day, there was, yeah, we all supported it.
Yeah, please.
Just quickly, and I don't want to delay it. Time is running out, so we do have to move along, and I thank you all for your presentation. The teacher contract, obviously a big driver of the contract here. What is it going forward, the percentage increases in salary? Contract? Yes. Have that information?
Yeah, we can get that for you. It's not a one set number because there's two factors that go into the teacher increase. There's the cost of increment, so teachers are moving along a step based on their years of experience, and then there's the general wage increase. The general wage increase is actually fairly low for anybody who's not on top step because they're moving on increment. And so we'll get you the percentage of the general wage increase and what the cost of increment is for each year. The only teachers that got the 3% raise were the teachers on the top step, 3% per year. Those same teachers took a 1% increase each year last contract in order to try and help all of the other teachers that were lower on the salary schedule and relieving us.
Thank you.
Steve, how many teachers are?
It's a great question, and it's reversed on us. So we had, typically, it's about 60 to 70% of your staff are on top step, and then about 30% are moving through. This contract, it swapped. So we only have about 30% of our teachers maxed out, which is an enormous shift. It just shows that the problem is now that's where your increment comes in. Teachers are now all moving every year through the steps. Correct. It was even one of the tougher challenges of starting negotiations. Just increment alone with no general wage increase using the current salary schedule started us at 7.1% total for the contract over 3 years. So, we had to work from there.
Are we in a competitive position to attract and retain teachers? And what are the factors? One of them is money.
We made great progress.
What are the other factors?
So there's a bunch of factors. I would say the first one is compensation. The second one would be the benefits package associated. If you have a family and you're in district, what's the percent of your insurance premium that you're paying? Where are
we there competitively?
We're at a decent spot. This particular contract, we did not pass on an increase to the insurance premiums, so that helped us. Before that, we were probably early on more on the higher end. But since we stayed right where we're in a decent spot. Lots of other types of language, the amount of sick days you get, like that would be, you could be bought out upon retirement, what percentage of that you get, the amount of personal days you get, family sick days in terms of if you have kids at home and how many of those you get. All of that language, we're very comparable to many other districts. And so that helps us in terms of people won't leave for another district that might offer more of that. But I also think just the culture of your district, teachers feeling valued and feeling supported, is probably the biggest factor, and there's a lot of
Do they?
research right there showing right
Do
now. The vote for the contract was nearly unanimous, which is unheard of. And I think we try to do our very best, knowing how difficult teaching is today. It's very different than it was 15 to 20 years ago, to make our teachers feel valued and supported whenever we can. And we spend a lot of times, when I took this position, Mr. Pepe and I made kind of an agreement. One of us would be in a building every single day of the school year. And so I spend a lot of time sitting with teachers, just listening. A lot of what I heard over the past 2 years as superintendent is what I think motivated a lot of the language in our contract, because it wasn't just the negotiating team and the bargaining unit talking. I heard it from teachers out there. We need time, or at the high school, it's not fair that we're teaching 6 and they're teaching 5, and it was that way they tried to get that out of 10 contracts and couldn't move it. That creates morale issues in the building when you get paid this amount for teaching 6, and this person gets paid the same amount for teaching 5. But that was contract language that existed for 10 contracts. So when you can try to eliminate those barriers, teachers feel heard because they were saying something, and for years it never changed. And when it finally changes, they feel valued.
Are we able to fill the competitive positions?
It's become far more difficult. Typically in the past, we are surrounded by districts that I think teachers face challenges with poverty, trauma, and transients. So if you're surrounded by more urban districts, teachers would come to Southington because you're not dealing with all three of those things: poverty, trauma, and transients. You might be dealing with them all, but not on the same level, the same scale. That can be very demanding and tiring for a teacher. We've now had teachers leave us for urban districts because they're making more money there. That's a reverse trend. Before, when the money difference wasn't that big, teachers would say, I'll take $4,000 less to stay in Southington and not have to deal with the poverty, trauma, and transient scale that some of these urban teachers have to face on a daily basis. But now, there was one particular teacher, and I used that in negotiations, that left us same amount of years experience, went to New Britain because he got $25,000 more. And it was in a shortage area, and he was a great teacher. He had been with us 17 years. But when you're raising a young family and you can get a $25,000 raise just by moving next door to the district next door, you consider your livelihood, and sometimes that's hard to argue against. Like I said, I do think we made progress, though, and have closed that gap with this contract.
One thing I bring up regularly every time we have this chat is when we open these union contracts, in a normal contract, anybody who's taken contract law knows that there's offer, acceptance, performance, and consideration, right? Mm-hmm. I hire you to paint my house, you say $100, I accept, you paint the house, and I pay. In these kind of contracts, everything's discussed except the performance. Mm-hmm. That's done separately outside of the contract. So all we're really talking about is some form of compensation, discipline, work hours, benefits, but we're not talking about the educational output. Mm-hmm. So we say we're going to pay you, but we're not going to hold you accountable for particular educational output. And the answer always given is, well, that's complex. You don't know what's going to come into the classroom, who's going to come in there, what their issues and challenges are. You can't hold the teacher accountable for, what comes in and then taking that population to a certain level. All of that said, how do you ensure in this year we're going into, we're going to pay millions more than we paid last year for essentially the same services? How do we get more output, the measurements, the metrics, the test scores, the graduation rates, the recidivism, or whatever it's called, people don't come in, truancy. How do we improve? What's the plan to use the money in some way to make next year better than this year in terms of output?
So I think the biggest danger that we can do is, rely on standardized test scores to tell a story. I've used this example actually with Colleen at our legislative CABE Day on the Hill, If you ask a middle schooler to take a standardized test that's going to measure the performance of a teacher, yet that test, there's no study guide, it's basically your curriculum that you've been given for the year, but it doesn't count towards your grade. There's no credit associated with it. There's no discipline if you decide to blow it off and not take it. It means nothing. It's not going to count towards your high school placement. You take the middle schooler, and they're going to be like, this is a waste of my time, and they're going to just go along and do their thing. You know, and we see it. I saw it as a middle school principal myself. Kids would openly say, this is a stupid test. It makes no sense. Why do we have to do this? If we're going to tie that to a teacher's pay, that would be really troublesome to me. What do we represent as a district? What do we see? Is our robotics team nationally ranked? NAMI, our music program, is recognized year over year after one of the best arts programs in the community. Our technology education department is awarded year over year by the State Department of Education as the best technology education department in the state. We are on the AP honor roll year after year for the percentage of AP courses we offer, the percentage of students that take AP tests, and the percentage of students that pass. The amount of ECE courses we offer to students that they can leave with up to 15 to 18 college credits and save their parents $30,000 in a semester's worth of tuition because they take UConn courses or some of the other affiliations we have with Central, Bridgeport, Goodwin, University of Iowa. We actually have one. So what are we offering our students? What's the value added investment that comes? And I think that's far more important to look at than a standardized test score, because if we can't control the student's effort and value of that metric, then it's really unfair to judge a teacher based on their performance.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting we do, but I am suggesting we find some way, whatever your way is, of measuring output and making sure we're driving and working towards that.
So I can tell you this, as a superintendent and an assistant superintendent and building principals, and having been in other districts, our administrators, and I say this with absolute confidence, are in classrooms just as much, if not more, than any district in the state. One of the things that you do to ensure return on investment is you have high expectations and you hold people to those expectations. And so when we have teachers that are not performing to the level that they need to perform, we will work with them, support them, put them on assistance plans, but eventually, if you can't meet our level of expectation, then maybe Southington's not the district for you. I can't quantify that for you because there's a bell curve in every group, and you never know year over year where those teachers are going to be, and what
But
their
have
needs
we
are going to be,
made
and what the
teachers alumni
circumstances
of
are.
our school system?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's not something I'm proud of because you always want a
no.
teacher to be successful.
Yes.
But at the same time, we have high expectations of our teachers. But I will tell you, it was one of the things that impressed me most about when I first came to Southington as the principal at Kennedy Middle School. Our teachers are worker bees. They get after it. They're not what I used to call a stoplight teacher, the teacher who literally decides on the way to work what they're going to teach today. Lesson plan and all. They spend a lot of time. There's a lot of extra effort. You saw it during COVID. Home visits, sending kids things that they needed, online calls with parents, unscheduled to support. I couldn't be more proud of our teaching staff, and I know there's not a value-added way to share their output, but if you just visited some classrooms with me on any given day and watched them do their thing, you'd be equally impressed.
Maybe we will, right,
Anytime, you're welcome to.
as the board. Just one, I'm not going to ask the question now, just tee it up, but looking at the full-time equivalents, we're seeing an increase of, 28 and a half from the prior year. We'll probably be asking questions on that. Why is enrollment flat, going down a bit, but yet we're increasing staff 28 and a half FTEs? That's going to be a question we have to sort, right?
Yep.
It's only right that we do. So we'll ask that all in the grid. Anybody else? No more questions? We'll start to ask the questions through the question grid. Thank you for
Sure.
participating in it.
As always, thank you, guys.
Thank you. Steve, can you send us the PowerPoint?
Yes, yep,
Thanks.
we'll do that.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
And thank you all who came out to support the superintendent and the chair. Oh, yeah, 10-1. Yep, you got it. Who's here? Thank you, thank you.
You got it, fine. If you don't know how to teach your teacher.
Okay, I'd like to, without objection, I'd like to move up a couple of items, but I'd like to move up the presentation on the state health insurance pool by our representative from the state of Connecticut. And I'd also like to then move up our discussion on the ambulance committee, move those up and then go into regular business, if that, without objection from anybody.
No objection, yeah.
Okay, so the first one is a presentation of the state health insurance pool by a representative of the state of Connecticut. Are you representing the state of Connecticut?
I am.
You go right up to the, if you have to use your laptop or you want to sit down, you're welcome to
Yeah.
join us at the thing.
Okay, and I have,
Okay. So just pick a spot where the microphone has a little green light on it. Well, welcome and thank you.
Yeah, you don't need it.
Thank you for coming. We'll do introductions in a second, but always want to thank somebody who took their time in the evening to come out and explain something to us.
Everybody get one?
Everybody got one? You got to keep the microphone close, or we record it and we
Sure.
stream it, and a lot of people watch it.
Okay.
And they send notes to me and saying, you got to tell the people to get closer to the microphone.
all right, is this okay?
That's perfect.
All right.
And just for way background, Mr. Chairman, this is very just informational. The Board of Finance has asked us in the past to get some information from the State 2.0. And I know Mr. Lebediak has a lot of knowledge in the insurance industry, so hopefully he can ask some good pointed questions. And again, this is just informational, just to get a background on what possibly could happen down the road, if needed.
Great. Okay, well, thanks for having me. My name is Bernie Slowick. I work for the State Comptroller's Office, and I'm here to talk about the partnership plan. Definitely appreciate your time. I am a town resident myself, so very interested in this myself. Without further ado, I'm just going to kind of go high level. I'm not sure everyone's familiarity with the partnership plan. So there's a lot of information here, and then obviously happy to take questions at the end. So what is Partnership 2.0? It's legislation that gives the comptroller the authority to offer the state of Connecticut health plan to municipalities and boards of ed around the state. We do have fixed monthly rates that renew on July 1st each year in conjunction with the state's health benefit renewal date. I believe you guys are also a July 1st date, so that would coincide pretty easily. And we do have monthly premium equivalent rates that are based on the state's overall claims experience. So on the back end, it is a self-insured plan through the state of Connecticut. However, we pool the state claims along with everybody in partnership and come up with a premium equivalent so that you know exactly what you're paying for the full year. Going on to the second page. So as of the first of this year, we do have 167 groups enrolled with approximately 25,000 employees or about 60,000 members. The closest district here is Plainville. We have both the board and the town, and we had them for 5+ years. But we do have a lot that you can go onto our website and take a look. It's listed alphabetically. Our benefits can be offered to actives and retirees, so anybody who's currently working, who's retired. We also have a Medicare Advantage plan. We currently have 31 groups enrolled with that, with over 3,200 members. That ties also to the state Medicare Advantage plan. So the benefit plan offerings. For medical, we offer the State of Connecticut Point of Service Plan, which is currently administered by Anthem Blue Cross and Blue Shield. Members do have access to Anthem's state Blue Care POS network in Connecticut and the Blue card program for seamless national coverage. So that's the question we always get. Is it local? Nope, absolutely not. It's nationwide. And obviously, we also include U.S. territories and emergent care outside of those offerings as well. We have something called the Health Enhancement Program, which I'll get into a little bit later in the presentation, which is a comprehensive wellness program tied to the state health plan. For pharmacy, we offer a four-tier copay structure for maintenance and acute drugs, and that is administered by CVS Caremark. And then for dental, the group can choose from 4 separate fully insured DPPO plans underwritten and administered by Cigna, can also offer a DHMO alongside those offerings. Finally, vision, an optional hardware rider. Currently, we realize that some groups do offer vision hardware, so that is an option buy up depending on the group's decision. So just looking high level, as I mentioned, it is a POS plan, so that means it's a similar PPO plan, in and out of network benefits, very rich plan design, same exact benefits that state employees have. So you can see in network, just high level, I'm not going to go through all of them. Preventive care is covered 100% in network. There's an annual deductible waived if you're HEP compliant, and I'll explain exactly how that works. But primary care and specialists, your typical copays are $15, and in some cases, it's actually waived for preferred providers. We have a separate network for that. And then your out-of-network is a $300 individual annual deductible with an 80-20% co-insurance split. But you can also see urgent care is a $15 copay, which is fairly low compared to others.
So the annual out-of-pocket, the individual 2,000, family 4,000,
Correct.
is that
All,
you pay up front?
nope.
What is that?
So the deductible is what you pay up front, and like I said, if you're HEP compliant, that's waived.
Oh, yeah, okay.
The out-of-pocket max is the most you'll pay out-of-pocket as a member, and it's all your copays that go towards that.
Oh, I got you.
So
Are you-
most people.
Are you in this, Kevin?
Is this exactly what?
Are you
the state
guys,
board-
you guys in this? This is what you
Yeah.
guys get?
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm happy with it.
Most people are. Yep. The out-of-pocket max is just the total of all your copays, and most people don't hit it because it's $15 or zero in several instances.
That's what I'm saying.
Yep.
I looked at this, I never paid.
Yeah, most
I
people
never
don't pay
paid a penny,
attention
so
to
I don't-
it. You don't have to. So the next page, pharmacy, again, also a rich benefit design. You can see we have 3 categories here, your maintenance, your non-maintenance, and then your HEP chronic conditions. So for your maintenance, those are long-term drugs, something you're taking a long time, you know, heart disease, high blood pressure, diabetes, et cetera. It's either a $5 or $10 copay for generics, $25 for preferred, $40 for non-preferred. Same with non-maintenance, so those are your short-term antibiotics, pain pills, et cetera. And then your HEP chronic conditions, which I'll explain later, but those are actually like your high blood pressure, hyperlipidemia, high cholesterol, diabetes, et cetera. Those are even lower if you have to take those. And those are at 0 for your generics, 5 for your preferred, 12.50 for non-preferred. And the reason we break it out between maintenance and non-maintenance, we have a maintenance network. What that means is if you're taking a long-term drug, you either stay in the maintenance drug network or you do mail order through CVS. The 2 major competitors that are not in the maintenance drug network are Rite Aid and Walgreens. So if you're taking long-term drugs, you cannot go to Rite Aid or Walgreens. However, you can get your short-term drugs there. So if you wanted to take antibiotics at Walgreens, go across the street to CVS and get for blood pressure, you can definitely do that. Or you can do mail order, exactly the same cost to you, whether you go to the brick and mortar or do mail order. And it is a mandatory generic requirement. So what that means is if there is a generic equivalent, an exact copy, you're required to take that generic, unless you do have a prior authorization from the doctor stating you can't for medical reasons. Once that gets submitted and approved, then you can go to the brand or the non-preferred at that particular copay. So healthy living on page 7. We do also have healthy living programs tied to the plan. We have something called the Providers of Distinction. What that means is there's providers in Connecticut who meet the highest patient care standard for specific procedures and conditions. And by completing these, plan members receive a cash incentive in the mail. One example is, let's say you are pregnant, you go to one of these Providers of Distinction. After delivery, a couple months later, you get a $250 check. So, and there's other instances, knee surgery, et cetera, and there's a list right here on the Care Compass website. Diabetes management, we also have virtual programs to prevent, manage, and reverse diabetes. We have a couple programs associated with that, and actually the copays associated with diabetic medications are all at a $0 copay. And then finally, orthopedic care. We do have virtual services 7 days a week for joint pain and mobility issues. It's a virtual, as I mentioned. They have a spine health program and other chronic conditions that you can use virtual coaching with an app. And that's fairly new with Hinge Health. So next, we're kind of going on the high level as a group if you were interested in how to apply. This is the main website that we have, the osc.ct.gov/ctpartner. If you're not familiar, highly recommend going out there. There's a lot of great information on there, and you can.
This is how an entire municipality applies.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, not the individual. Correct.
So for us, as Southington, we would have to, if we were to do this, it would be a whole negotiated thing, but we
Sure.
would bring the Board of Ed as a separate entity and the rest of everybody's a.
That's a great segue. So we
Oh,
look at it
sorry,
in
keep
two ways.
going.
No,
Keep
by
going.
all means.
I don't want to interrupt you.
Not at all. So we look at the full group, and in this case, it can be the entire town or the Board of Ed or combined, however you guys want to do it. You simply complete the application and you're automatically accepted. But we do also offer partial groups. So what does that mean? It means any part of the entire town or any part of the Board of Ed. So for example, we had a large group join. They started off with the police department, Bridgeport, who were very interested. They applied as a partial group, and then slowly the rest of the city came on, and eventually the Board of Ed. So we have both the whole city and the Board of Ed of Bridgeport, but it all started because the police union applied as a partial group. And then in that case, we look at the application along with census and plan data, and it's reviewed by the Healthcare Cost Containment Committee, and the determination of acceptance into the program is made by them. So it's not an automatic in if it's a partial group, only if it's a full group. Okay. And all groups joining the plan cannot offer their employees any other medical or pharmacy plan other than partnership. So what we mean by that, you can't offer our plan plus, let's say, the HSA or HRA you currently have. Reason for that is we want to prevent any kind of adverse selection. Obviously, the cheaper plan most people would take who don't use the plan, and the more expensive is the higher risk. So moving to the SPP, what we call the State Partnership Plan. Once your application is received, the team reaches out to confirm benefits and answer any remaining questions. We send your information to the carriers and then start the implementation process. We ask for at least a 60-day notice for implementation. So if your group would like to join for 7/1/25, we'd like to know by May 1st. And then if you wanted to add the Medicare Advantage plan, we ask for a 90-day notice because of certain Medicare rules, opt-out rules that they have to follow. And the final part in terms of the group level, there's a 3-year commitment. This is not at an individual level. This is at the group level, the town, the Board of Ed, et cetera. So groups are required to participate in the plan for 3 years per the contract. Groups seeking to leave prior to the end of the year 3 must submit a request in writing to the Healthcare Cost Containment Committee. If an early exiting group's claims have exceeded the premiums paid since entering the plan, the following penalty is assessed. After 1 year, it's the lesser of the excess of the group's total cost over the rates, since they were charged since joining the plan, or 5% of the total premium paid by the group in the most recent plan year. After 2 years, that goes down to 3%, and then after 3, there is no early termination fee. I can tell you I've been running the plan since it started back in the end of 2015. Not one group has left early, so I've never had to apply this. Groups have left, but after their 3-year commitment. So the next pages are dedicated to HEP because there's it's something tied to the health to the medical plan that not everybody is familiar with. Excuse me. So the Health Enhancement Program, or what we call HEP, is a wellness program attached to the state employee health plan that targets preventive care and chronic disease management. So for preventive care, the program requires members enrolled in the state health plan get age-appropriate wellness exams and preventive screenings, and we'll see those on the next page. And then for chronic condition management, it targets the following chronic conditions. Those are diabetes, asthma or COPD, heart disease, heart failure, hyperlipidemia, and hypertension. There's a $0 copay for office visits related to those targeted conditions. And as I mentioned earlier, there's lower copays for maintenance drugs used to treat those targeted conditions of 0, 5, and 1250. So page 12 has the HEP requirements, or what we call the HEP grid. And you can see they're pretty minimal. And keep in mind, everybody always asks, is this all that's covered? Nope, this is all that's required as a minimum to become HEP compliant. So you can see it's broken out first by your dependents, who are between the ages of 6 to 25, children, and then employee and spouses starting at age 18. So let's say you're between the ages of 40 to 49. You're required to have a preventive or a physical at least every 2 years, a dental cleaning at least 1 per year, cholesterol screening every 5, breast cancer screening, if applicable, every 2 years, cervical cancer screening, if applicable, a pap smear every 3, or a pap HPV every 5, and then a colonoscopy starting at 45 plus every 10 years. So upon a group's enrollment into the partnership plan, all members are automatically enrolled in the HEP program, and this is managed by Quantum Health. We'll get into what they do a little bit later, but members do have access throughout the year to a dedicated customer service team, as well as the HEP web portal, which shows their compliance status. And then on page 14, members do have 1 full calendar year to become acclimated with the program and meet their HEP requirements. So for example, if you join the partnership plan on July 1st of 25, members would have until December 31st of 2026 to meet their HEP requirements. And it's based on calendar year. So all members, family members enrolled in the plan must meet their age-specific requirements for the employee to be considered HEP compliant, and communications and reminders are sent to members throughout the year. So even if you don't jump on the website, we'll send something to your house saying you're still missing X, Y, and Z, if in fact you're missing something towards the end of the year.
So if you're not HEP compliant,
Segue.
I haven't been part, that hasn't happened to me, so that's why I don't know.
Page
I
15.
know you get a rebate if you are, so.
So employees that do not meet their HEP requirements are considered non-compliant into the HEP program, and the following penalty is implemented. There's an additional $100 per month billed premium that becomes part of the employee share contribution, and there's a $350 individual deductible up to $1,400 per family attached to the in-network medical plan. And that deductible applies to non-copay related services. But once a member does complete the missing requirements, they're automatically reinstated into the HEP program the first of the following month. So a little bit more on Quantum Health. They're fairly new, a couple years out. We call them a client concierge for the state of Connecticut and partnership plan. So in addition to managing the HEP program, they also assist members directly with claims, billing, benefit questions, finding in-network providers, verifying coverage, getting prior approval, looking up providers, reviewing your care options, and replacing ID cards. So what's nice about having them is they don't, your members, your employees don't have to funnel through HR and kind of get mixed up with a HIPAA. You can say, hey, call Quantum Health, jump on their website, reach out directly, and they'll help them. They're very good at what they do, and we're quite happy with their services. So looking at the rates, as of the end of January, the base renewal rate projection is a 10 to 12%. We have a regional rate adjustment, which will also be factored into the above, depending on the county. And we will finalize the rates in the beginning of March. So that's typical every year. We try to give a projection at the end of November. We give another one in January. And then we finalize in March. And the reason we do that is we understand that you guys have to create a budget. And if you have no clue, that's very hard to do last minute. So we've been doing that recently. And then these regional adjustments will be reviewed every 5 years just to make sure that the ratio is still accurate. So for Hartford County, it's a negative 0.5. So you can expect right now a 9.5 to an 11.5% increase. And in March, we'll know for sure. And the next page are the current rates for July 1st, 24, so that you have a frame of reference. So looking at Hartford County, you can see the actives, the pre-65s, and then your post-65 non-Medicare retirees, if you have any. Some people do, some don't. But you can see the actives broken out into three tiers, your single, employee plus one, and then family. And keep in mind, this is the full cost per member per month, per employee per month. So if you have an employee share, which I'm sure you do, we don't get involved in that. We leave that up to you and your contracts. This is what's going to be billed to the town or to the Board of Ed on behalf of your members. And then below that is the Medicare Advantage for those individuals enrolled in the plan. These are actually older rates, so I apologize for that, but we can update that for you. It's also on the website. That's the end of the presentation. So I'll take any questions on the plan or anything else you have.
How many municipalities do you have right now?
168, but keep in mind, we also have like housing authorities that break off. We actually have the housing authority here in Southington along with the water department. We have certain libraries that are separate entities, a lot of different,
And that
what we
goes
call.
into the 167
Correct, yep.
number?
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Wayne, please.
Oh, well, you're the insurance guy, you probably have a better question than I do.
No.
Well, what makes your pool better than our pool?
It's larger, right?
Just the size?
Size, right? It's stable. Yes, it's a high year. I think we're seeing that across the board in the market from what I've been told. A lot of inpatient hospital is going up, pharmacy is going up. So it's not specific to our case. Last year, we had a 2% increase. We've averaged in the last 5 years, I think it's been around a 5, not including this year. So that's the thing. We have, our pooling power, and then we also have these programs that a lot of smaller groups just can't have. They can't offer quantum health because it's an added expense. We can't, you can't offer providers of distinction that give, members money back.
Obviously, your robust options, they cost money, though. They're not,
Sure.
they're not free.
Right. No, absolutely. So, I mean, you can, the old term, the Cadillac plan, right?
Yeah.
This would have qualified as a Cadillac
I'm sure
plan.
it would, yeah.
But you're getting at a cheaper cost than the Cadillac. That's the way you can look at it. I mean, yes, you're not paying the Ford price, it's somewhere in between.
I mean, just me being on plan as a state worker and me being on self-insurance, this plan is better than what the town had, excluding what the cost is, just the benefits itself. This is better than what Southington has with Anthem, because we have better Anthem plan, personally. I can't vouch for
But
the
there's, I
pricing.
imagine there's a cost to that,
Well,
too.
I don't know that. That's, because I don't.
The
this is the
state
first I
picks
think.
up all of your health insurance?
No, no. It's prorated. Like,
But the number in here is the full cost.
The full cost.
How we share it as an
It's up to
individual.
you.
yeah. So our number's not this number because it contributes. So the plan itself is better than the current plan, I would think, in town.
This was just informational only to bring back to Self-Insurance Committee to have an option.
And then one question, why were,
So they were going, usually it's price. They went back, a lot of groups we had maybe had an HSA and an HRA, and it's cheaper, right? Off the bat, you're making them pay a deductible, co-insurance going up their out-of-pocket max. So off the bat, it is cheaper. There was also kind of a spin-off of our plan with a certain carrier that kind of blew up 3 years down the road, and a lot of those groups came back 3 years after. So, it's really up to the group. I mean, like I said, it's a robust plan, but if you can't afford it, after a certain amount of years, some of the groups just, decided to get a cheaper alternative.
Brittany, what's been the 167 or 168 you said currently, what's been the history over the past 5 years? I mean, where was it 5 years ago to where it is today?
I'd have to look, but I helped build this from zero in 2015. We started off with maybe 10, 12 groups in 2016. But I would say in the past 3 years, it's been pretty steady, 150, 160 at
Okay.
least. Yep.
I mean, has there been more joining than leaving?
Oh, absolutely, especially
Okay.
this year. Surprisingly, we have quite a bit of interest despite the high increase we're projecting. We have a lot of towns looking at this. Don't quote me, but I think maybe 10 or 12 groups left, and probably half of them came back and since inception here.
Okay, and then in terms of the 167 or 168 with 60,000 members, so the average group is on the smaller side, I mean, compared to Southington. I mean, that's an average of 350 members per group, we're close to 10 times that size.
Yeah, so we have some groups that have one person, and then we have groups that have 1,000, but yes.
How many, I think we're 2,500, 3,000 or so. I mean, how many would be our size?
I'd have to look, but if you do go on the website, I list the name and the group size, so you can download it to an Excel and kind of play with it and see,
Okay.
the size of the groups, absolutely.
And then, do you happen to know, I mean, the ones that have left due to cost, have they size?
No, it's kind of been a mix. I'd say the larger ones are the ones that came back. We had a couple towns and boards come back, but I had I think it was a housing authority that recently left. That's been in the plan since 2016, but, the cost was just a bit too high because they're very small,
Okay.
They like the plan. They say, we're not leaving because of the plan.
Sure,
We're leaving
sure.
because of the cost.
Sure.
But the more people in the plan, the better the cost, right? The more you could get in there.
The law of large numbers,
Yeah.
right? That's the plan. Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And you're a resident too, huh? So
Yeah, absolutely.
Welcome to our meeting.
Thanks for having me.
But thank you for presenting it. It gives us an option, and we have a self-insurance committee, which Joe heads up, and I guess we'll take it back there and
Well, yeah.
let them
Yeah, and reach out with
look
any
it
questions.
over, and it's wonderful to always have options.
Sure. All
Thank
right,
you.
thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'd like to go next to our ambulance committee. Bill, do you want to join us here, or?
It's up to you, wherever you want.
Yeah, you can sit over here, just so you could sit down and flip through the papers easier. But the podium works, too. We have all these nice comfy chairs, so, yeah.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity. Chairman Leary had asked me, a while back, I presented to the council an overview of our EMS service. I'm sure you've been aware. We attempted to change vendors, and we lost, so I'm going to give you kind of a historical overview of where we are, where we're going, and then I'll answer any questions. So currently, AMR is our EMS service provider. They've provided EMS service for the town for the past 37 years. They started as MedStar, so we've had a long partnership with them. They hold what is called the Primary Service Area Provider, which is the PSAR, which gives them the ability to provide first responder care to the town of Southington. So as part of the system, we have AMR, who's our first responders. We have the Southington Police Department, which is the supplementary first responder. So when we take a medical call, we dispatch AMR, and then we dispatch a police officer if it's a priority 1. If it's a priority 2 call, they still handle the majority of those calls, but it also depends on activity and shift coverage and calls for service. We also have the fire department as a backup to AMR and the police department, especially when AMR goes into overload. I'll go over that a little later. So everything, the system is like a 3-tiered, but it's AMR and the PD primary, and then FD comes in where there's extenuating circumstances. So kind of to look at, how many medical calls do we have in town? So since 2021 to 2024, we've averaged well over 6,000 calls per year. We've gone up 16.5% from 2021, which was 6,240. We finished out in 2024 with 7,269. That was almost 800 calls more than we had in 2023. It operates under a contract, and then the EMS committee is part of the process. So I had been a longstanding member. I assumed the chair in 2024. So we meet quarterly with AMR. I review the ambulance calls monthly, discuss things. If I have to bring it to the town manager's level, I will, and then we move along there. So we're kind of the overseers to make sure the town is getting what they're supposed to get. So it's covered by a contract which is currently expired. We're operating under the contract that started in 2018, and it expired in June 20th of 2023. So what the contract gives us right now, in AMR, we're working without a contract, is 2 ALS ambulances, which is a advanced life support system, which has a paramedic and an EMT on the ambulance, 24/7, 365. And then Monday through Friday, from 12 noon to 8 PM, we have a third unit. So, and then that covers, so we have 3 ambulances, and then on Saturday and Sunday, we go with the 2 ALSs full-time. AMR also has a fly car, which is their supervisor car, which about 5 months ago, they relocated to work out of the Atwater Street headquarters. So they also respond to calls, but they have the ability, to help stabilize, but they can't transport. And that currently comes with a 0%, $0 subsidy. So we don't pay anything for this service. AMR will bill the individual or whatever, and that's how they make their money. Within the contract, we have priority 1 calls and we have priority 2 calls. So priority 1 would be life-threatening emergencies like cardiac arrest, severe trauma. AMR needs to be on scene within 7 minutes and 59 seconds for priority 1. Priority 2 is 1359, and those calls would be, they're not immediately life-threatening. It could be like abdominal pain, moderate bleeding, a potential fracture. By the contract, they have to hit those numbers 90% of the time. So if you look at 2024, they hit 90%, 7 months out of the 12. They averaged 89.91% for the calendar year, so call it 90%. So the other months, they didn't hit it. They were in the high 80s or whatever. So those are things that we talk about when we're at the ambulance committee. So why did we end up going to an RFP after 37 years? And I think that's important because that shows the town has been intentional with their ambulance service. We've had a partnership for 37 years with the same company, so it's not something that we change regularly. But over the years, we have been looking at calls, and we've been toying around with adding a third ambulance. And we heard, kind of having informal talks, it'll be 100,000 a year, it'd be 200, it'd be, one of our committee members said they heard it would be 600,000 in, in informal talk. So any change to the existing contract would require an RFP. We couldn't just, the contract has been renewed because AMR it's a 3-year contract, and 4 and 5 are always optional. And they've always said that the town will continue your $0 subsidy, so we just kept redoing it. So we knew if we were gonna ask for a third ambulance, we would have to go, we'd have to go out to bid just by town policy. We couldn't just sit there and award it to AMR. So some of the considerations were, system overload, and basically that's when there's too many ambulance calls compared to ambulances in town. So when I took over as chair in 2024, I started to track the overloads. In 2024, we had 447 overload situations. So that means it could be the 4th, the 5th, the 3rd ambulance call. So then when they're in overload, that's when the FD comes to support, because what they'll do is they'll say, look, we're in overload, we don't have a unit to send, we're bringing one from another town, or we're going to have an extended response. So then PD and FD responds. So that's when the fire department really plays a pivotal role, is when we're in overloads. But out of that 447, 178 of the calls, which figures out to about almost 16 calls per month, overload that was occurring when we only had, it was the 3rd call. So you had 2 ambulances, you had the 3rd call, we're in overload, we're rolling the FD, we're having extended delays. So over time, on the committee back, we always talked about this 3rd ambulance, but with the tracking stuff, we started to get some data. So that was one of the reasons saying, hey, look, if we had a 3rd ambulance, that's going to save 178 calls, and if it's a heart attack or something, seconds count. Another thing was, if you look at, Southington's no different than the state, we're getting to be an aging population, so we kind of wanted to become proactive. And then the last thing was to improve medical response, because they were, we figured with the extra ambulance, you could increase your response time and make it better for the community. So we discussed it, we decided to go out to RFP, the town hired a consultant, so they helped us with the RFP. It went out, we had 2 companies bid, one was AMR. They bid $2.6 million for over 3 years, and then year 4 was $939 and change, and $960 $7,000 in year 5 and change. Hunters was the other company that bid. They bid 0 subsidy year 1 through 3. And then year 4 and 5, they assigned a TBD, so they didn't price. So on May 22nd, 2023, we sent our recommendation to the council. We voted to accept the Hunter's bid. The council approved it, but under the statute, because the state statute, they're allowed to have a hearing through the state. So we had a hearing, we had testimony, and then on July 1st of 2024, the hearing officer denied the town's application to change PSAR, because we wanted PSAR to the Hunters. We didn't agree with the decision, nor did our council. There was like 3 main areas that the state hearing officer spoke about. One was unit hour utilization. And again, this is one way of figuring staffing, because I did some research after we got his, his decision. So 0.5 or higher, if you're using hour utilization, town was currently running at 0.3. But again, when we're looking at staffing, whether it's like my niche was staffing, the police staffing is staffing when you're doing calls for service. Unit utilization is one benchmark. There's other ways of looking at it, but that was one of the things they said. So they said that it didn't meet the threshold. The second thing that the hearing officer said was sustainability and the unknown costs in year 4 and 5. So the hearing officer said, well, because Hunters didn't give you a price year 4 or 5, they could basically charge you $6 million and then you're stuck. But our argument was year 4 and 5 is always optional. The contracts are always 3 years with 4 and 5 optionally, so, but again, that was one of the things. And then the last thing was the regional impact of the EMS system. They brought in testimony from other communities that AMR was to move from Southington, it would have negatively impacted their community. And that's not even a requirement in the law. I mean, the municipality covers their own thing. So if, we're being held now to what I believe would be a different standard. Yes, anything has an impact, but if we had Hunters and another community needed an ambulance, they could use the same, they could have mutual aid. The difference is mutual aid would probably be charged if it was an AMR town rather than have AMR with all the other towns. It's kind of like just using cover different things. So that was the decision that they made. It cost us about $290,000 between the litigation and the consultant, and this is where we stand now. On February 4th, I had permission from the town manager. I've been talking with AMR, trying to get a contract in place. I'm not comfortable running the contract. They've been very good. They're honoring the contract. And this thing wasn't about like AMR was giving us bad service. That's not why we went for RFP. We wanted to our service. So that's where we're looking at. I'm trying to work with them now. Hopefully we'll hear something within the next back to the council and talk from there, and also with the EM. That's kind of an overview. If you have any specific questions, I
Feel there will be a cost to EM.
Well, it all depends. We'll see what happens. Are we looking to go to 3 ambulances at the cost of $2.6 million? We're looking at, there's other options that I'm trying to work out with AMR. They've been, open to discussion. But it's also looking at what's the best interest of our community. Again, our service is very good now. We were just trying to elevate it, saying, look, we are getting older. We were looking at those overloads. And again, you figure right now, at a 3rd ambulance, what I had a hard time wrapping my head around was we get an extra 8 hours Monday through Friday, so you're down 16 for those 5 days, and then we're asking for another 48, and they're telling us it's like much to me, but I'm not an.
That's the coverage of the weekend.
No, that was like a full
Oh, so-
three ambulances, because right
Okay.
now, you're getting two 24/7s, but you're getting one ambulance for 8 hours, Monday through Friday, so you're short 16 on those 5 days, and then if you wanted to run three 24/7, you're grabbing another 48 on the other, and this is where we're having an elevated cost. And we're going from zero subsidy to 2.6 million, it just, to me, didn't seem like, it was from a common sense perspective. But we're working with them, and then, I know we talked about, like, the council was talking to, looking at our legislators to maybe change laws to try and make it a little bit easier. But again, I find it hard to believe that any law would not allow some type of hearing. So, we did the best we could with what we had. But I'm confident that we can probably strike some type of, in AMR, and if not, we'll continue our service till we figure out where we want to go. We just didn't think it was prudent to go back out to RFP.
And by improvement, you just mean extended service? Because their work is
Yes,
fine. it's
yes,
just
extended service,
hours.
but there's also some things in the contract that are kind of ambiguous, where we keep discussing them. So one of the things, and Bill Sheetinger, who's the regional director from AMR, agreed with me. I said, can we take these issues that we're talking about, like even response times? Like up until June of 2023, AMR used to report, here's our response time for priority 1. We were 90, we were 95, we were 85. Here was your priority response for priority 2. We were 90, 85, or whatever. And then here it is in the aggregate. Well, they changed it to just an aggregate percentage. So we don't know, are they, and this was asked at the council level, and I'm trying to get the answer for them. Are they missing the mark at 90%, or are they not missing the mark on priority 1s, or is the majority of it priority 2s? And, Bill was in agreement, let's work at this, because if we keep talking about this, and it's like, let's just get this, because if you read the contract, to me, it's specific, it's priority times, and they're separate. But, so that's the thing I hope to achieve with there, and hopefully maybe we can get a little bit of an increase service.
And the source of the data is AMR's dispatch
Well, there's,
that tells you the times?
what we do is they provide me with their monthly reports with their spreadsheets and everything, so I see the calls, but I also have the ability to pull data from what our officers are responding. And the data is really close. I mean, we also started to track overloads. Like I said, we never tracked overloads before. So some of the things that we would talk about, we didn't have the historical data to go back on. And before, actually, with our new town manager, a lot of our stuff was done in executive session, so there wasn't notes, but it really to open session, because now we have the data. Because part of the hearing was, well, you're talking about this, but you don't have the data. And we're like, well, we're talking about it, you're not taking notes and stuff like that. So we've kind of got some things in there. But again, the reason for the RFP was to try and improve, service for our citizens. It wasn't that AMR was doing a job, because if you look at it, we're over 7,000 ambulance calls a year. That we're trying to work it out to at least get something in place, so if the legislation does change, or if the town down the road decides to go out to RFP again, I just think there's a couple things that I would like to do differently, and I shared them with the town manager. He agreed, like, even this utilization rate kind of struck me as funny, sense that I'm not blaming the consultant, but when we talked about a third unit, like, I had done staffing in previous budgets with the police department. If we asked for more people, we had different things. We knew that this utilization thing was something that was going to, be brought up, and, okay, is there another way of looking at it, because this is only one. But unfortunately, AMR brought this up, and the hearing officer put a lot of weight on it, and we really didn't have an answer. Like someone, the consultant didn't say, well, yes, that's the utilization rate, but if you look at it as, shift relief factor, like how many people do you need on a shift to make sure you have all these ambulances? Utilization is only one way of looking at it. They could have looked at it a different way. A little more intentional, but the goal is to get a contract in place, at least for, short term, to get things So we have it. I would be more comfortable with the contract, and that's not, AMR has been very good as far as honoring the contract. That's not the issue. I just don't think it's good practice, not.
So when we're in overload, 3 ambulances or 2 tied up, how quickly could we get somebody medical attention? Is it still within that time frame?
Yes, because.
By fire department, police?
Right, because it goes through the process. Like, the police are probably dispatched in 98% of all ambulance calls, so they're getting on scene very quickly. And if AMR is an overload, we're also sending the FD, who, they're trained as EMTs, so now you have elevated service. So you have the patients that have the care. Absolutely, that's not, that's not the issue. But a lot of the overloads, and if, even if you look at the third ambulance, some people could say, well, that's only 15 calls. That's not even, one. So the thing is, it's like, but if you're that one person, so we focused in on the 3. If you're 4, 5, 6 calls deep, that you can't staff for something like that.
Is there any benefit to having one policeman on every shift become an EMT instead of like the MRT or the ER?
No, because the trouble is the cost to maintain the EMT's, certification, and then is that person working, is that not, like, our officers are trained, they have AEDs, they have oxygen, they can do this, and the response time, it's not like, oh my God, AMR is not getting there. Because again, if we want to really look at it in reality, we had 7,269 calls, and we're talking about 447.
Okay.
But when you're talking about medical calls, if it's my mom or my dad or somebody here who's having a heart attack, and it takes an ambulance a little bit longer time to get there, so, we're just trying to improve service. And
So
that-
they'll get the care in the overload mode, they may not get the transportation, which is a piece of the care.
Yes, and they'll get, and the AMR will get there as soon as they can. And
But the firemen and the policemen will have enough there to,
the problem with this exercise is that I don't believe the hearing officer applied the law properly. He took into account that hunters came in and said $0 for 3 years, and then they didn't give us a year 5. Okay, that's not, like, that's not in the statute. I mean, because if hunters turned around and said to us, we're going to charge you $5 million in year 4, then we would have went out to bid again. I mean, but we've been intentional. For 37 years, we didn't change that, and that kind of went out the window. The other community thing, I completely disagree. Because if a surrounding community needs help, and we have regardless of an ambulance service, we have mutual aid, they could use hunters, and hunters would go in and do what they have to do. So, some people could say, oh, you spent $290,000 and we lost, but I don't think that I don't think it was accurately adjudicated, because the Sir.
Thank you.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. And one thing I will say, like, if somebody is, heart attack or something, or a stroke, Bradley does an outstanding job. They'll bring Bradley there to stabilize them, because if it's really serious, they're going to say, look, I can't get to Hartford, I have to go there. But you're right, and some people say, well, the ambulance comes and they spend too much time at the scene. And I remember when, the town used to run the ambulance, they would come there, they pick the person up, and yeah, I was a patrolman in 1985. And yeah, that's how we did medical care, but now those medics can push drugs that can make the difference. If you're having a stroke and you have somebody that can push the drugs there, and that's going to make all the world of difference. So we tell people it's not that they're taking more time on the scene, they're starting medical intervention that we couldn't get 15, 20 years ago. And Bradley does a great job of stabilizing people and everything like that. So we are in,
Even that Lifestar comes in there. too.
yeah. I mean, Bradley we are very fortunate to have there because our citizens that are having emergency medical problems that need care right away for stabilization, Bradley can.
Then we should
do it.
push some people there, right? We should help Bradley by directing our ambulance to use it more.
Well, a patient has the certain ability to go where they want unless it's a life-threatening emergency. If the medics feel the closest available hospital is Bradley, then people are going. And I think we're all subject to unfair narratives. I think the narrative sometimes out there is like, oh, Bradley does an outstanding job.
You got a great,
They do a great job, they have great dedicated staff, they have great doctors. Sometimes it's just.
Yeah, and they're not doctors who are only in that hospital. They rotate. So you're not getting a doctor who just works in Bradley on small items. They're doctors rotating from the network. But, okay. Well, thanks for the update.
Thanks for staying
Thank
on
you.
that.
Appreciate it.
No
Thank you.
problem.
Doing your
Thank you.
ratios
For the
and
update.
stuff, so that's good that you.
All right. Going to try and move quick through the agenda if everybody's okay?
Well, we're going to have to stop as we need to, sorry.
Yeah, well, yeah, but we'll
I'm sorry?
try and get through. So let's go through, approval of the minutes of the January 8th executive session included in the packet.
Motion to approve.
second.
Motion is second, any adjustments? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstain? Motion carries. Approval of the minutes of January 8th regular meeting.
To approve.
Motion is second, any changes? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, abstain? Carries 6-0. The financial assessment, we'll just give a quick one where we are with the revenue and expenses.
Sure. Revenues through December 2024, with the exception of the building permits and fees, they are reported through November 2024. The December revenues are still being reconciled for the building department. So total revenues through December, the variance is about 1 million to the good.
Okay. Expenses,
Expenses, we have nothing to report at this time. We're not seeing any significant
No news is
Issues.
good news.
That's right.
all right. The contingency line item,
To date, we have 81,738 approved. On the agenda for this month, we have 72,500. 2,500 is requested for finance overtime and 70,000 accumulated leave payout. So if all is approved today, the remaining budget will be 920,762.
okay. Next one, subcommittee reports, sewer?
Yes, we met, we had to do some repairs out there on the streets, but we had the money in the budget, we just reallocated, I think. Was that? Approvals, I don't remember, but yeah, I think we're good. Nothing
Okay,
really.
how about the uncollectible receivables?
We're working on that through the town manager and finance. We're going after
Going after them,
the banks are paying.
I was advised by the tax collector that we won't be doing a tax sale till next calendar year. So some people were under the assumption that would be a tax sale this year. We're letting them know that they do have. Ask for payment plans, and we say that they're till December 31st, 2025 to get caught up. That's your payment plan.
Because the problem is if it goes too much longer, then we can't collect, so,
Oh, we have only a window?
yes.
15 years,
People owe 15 years worth of sewer bills?
we've had many expire over the last 5 years. We've got people who haven't paid their sewer bills in over 25 years.
All right, that's the problem, yeah.
Well,
Oh.
it's being looked at.
Yeah.
It's being addressed now. Why it wasn't caught earlier, good question.
Okay, Public Works, Mr. Pocock?
Okay, we have to, one thing, commend the highway and other municipality people involved in. So, we also don't want to forget the bulky waste is closed when it's snowing, and there's a schedule. Or, I have one here, but got to bear in mind that the weather.
Will they post something on the website regarding?
I try to get it up on Facebook this season,
Okay.
but in the past it hasn't, no.
Okay.
And just, tonight is our 13th precipitation event of the year. Last
Right.
year at this point, we were at 6, so contingency transfers and this is all going to be coming back very soon.
Other than that, basically, everything's going along.
Anything on open space?
No, the meeting I had was canceled, but there is something.
Okay, self-insurance, December update?
Yeah, we only have the numbers for December, we don't have January, but the last 3 months have been good. We're, I don't know, 1.2 million or so to the good, under budget, a little less than $1 million year-to-date, halfway through the year, so it's a positive story.
Okay. Anything on economic strike?
Brandon, how do you say this, Steve?
Yeah,
Was, try to put some roadway into a virtual area, industrial, to get that work. West Queen Street on West Queen Street.
Okay, any questions on all those reports? Next one, just other committees, Investment Committee, it says rates will be presented. I think this is the rates here.
Yes, that's correct.
So what does this tell us? How much money is invested and what the,
Correct. It's reporting the cash balance updated through January 2025, as well as reporting the interest rates for our short-term and long-term accounts. Short-term rates are showing a slightly decrease, ranging in 4.10% to 4.43%. And the interest rate for long-term has shown a slight increase to 3.10%.
we have 112 million invested.
Yeah,
Short-term,
in short-term,
Yeah.
correct.
20,000 long.
Oh, and only 20 million long-term. 112 million short-term invested, 20 million long-term invested.
Correct.
It's interesting that we had extra short-term available cash in August, because we get paid in July for taxes. You would think that would be your big month for extra cash, so. Obviously, you weren't here, Christina, so you have no clue what happened in August, but interesting to see.
I mean, how many people pay on day one now?
Unless a lot's coming in through the mortgages,
A lot of
too.
it's probably coming at the end of July, which hits probably August,
Maybe.
right? Because I think, what's the,
We'll
You have
see what
until
happens.
the end of the
Deadline,
following month.
you
So you
have
have until January 31 or August
July.
31.
August 31 before you have to pay a penalty?
I think so, right?
No, July 31.
July 31.
July 31.
Yeah, June and,
Okay.
June and December, so you pay by the end of July or the end of January.
Did you see it? Well, you don't, February's not over yet, so we don't.
I'll have that for next month.
Okay, any questions on the investment in rates? Fire Commission liaisons, anybody continue to go? All right, we'll keep an eye. Any other reports? All right, we'll go to board communications excluding, we'll go to board communications, but public communications, anybody? Nobody from the public? Okay. Board communications, member to member? Anything?
I did have, I know you want to keep it short, but
That's fine.
the CCM sent us a request for, see what, how they can
survey?
help municipal boards of finance, like a survey or hearing from us. I didn't know if you wanted to kind of get back to them as a group, or how you wanted to do that,
I
if
thought
at
it was
all.
individual. I responded individually.
Oh, okay, that's fine.
Maybe we all just click and see if there's something we wanted them. They're a great resource. I don't think
See,
we
I'm not
use them
familiar
enough.
enough with them to know, and maybe we could have a
Maybe that's another thing.
presentation.
We haven't had them here in a while, but they used to do trainings, new member trainings. People would go off and spend an afternoon there. They do a lot. They did research. They did a little research. We were looking at the tax programs. I've called them in the past. Maybe we could have them come when we have a,
Yeah, maybe after budget season.
when we have a meeting that doesn't have extra added to it, we'll have CCM, the program director or something, come and just tell us what services they offer, because we are a member, we do pay,
And they're,
And-
they're good to talk to.
and we're allowed to use the research bench, bounce ideas off of them, so
Sounds good.
let's have them come. But now, let's get through budget.
In preparing for budget, I'm a little, I'm upset that the state keeps reducing our grants and money they want to give us. And so obviously what they're just doing is moving it, the expense to the town for us to. Yet they say they want affordable housing. Well, what is the largest expense of housing? Maybe your principal and interest, but after that, it's taxes. So they're saying they want affordable housing, yet they're pushing municipalities to increase real estate taxes, which is a huge burden on residential and commercial people. So yeah, it's kind of interesting to see how that's working out. I'm totally, I'm sorry, but the rates are going to have to go up because the state keeps cutting money, and it's going to just make real estate more expensive. So that's my little soapbox for today.
Yeah, I mean, we'll have a lot more of those soapboxes when we get the budget, right?
Yeah.
Because people are going to want to know what's going on, why are taxes heading up, and you're going to have to explain it to them. Okay, any more communications, anything? All right, let's go to administrative business. I'll try and take all 6 consent agenda items together. And again, consent agenda items are money where the town, are items where the town has received the money, and all we're doing is appropriating it back to the department and the line item so it could be used. Typical things here are donations or insurance claims for vehicle damage, something like that. So let's go through them all, and I'll read them, and then somebody can make a motion, and we'll just approve them in all 6 together. Appropriation, $3,678. Special revenue, police vehicle loss damage. It's an insurance claim. The second one, appropriation, $18,919. Police speed trailer grant. Oh, the trailer with the speed limit on it. Appropriation, $280. Police canine program supplies. Appropriation, $3,190. Town clerk nominee fee program. And then a big one, we'll do that one. That's okay. Appropriation, $1,381,674, capital projects fund for the Plantsville Safety Program coming from the LoCIP grant. And the last one, $500, special revenue fund for youth services for a STEPS donation. We have a motion to take action
A
on all.
motion, but I would like to just make one comment
Okay.
after we do.
I'll second.
Motion is second. Any discussion?
On the town clerk, is it?
Yeah, town clerk nominee
Yeah,
fee
fee.
program,
That goes into a
$3,190.
special revenue fund, so
how do we get that money into the general fund? Where's that money go? Why isn't that?
Going into Fund 209.
It's going into our special revenue,
Right.
which at the end of
That's money that doesn't just sit in this special fund and it's not, so.
not in the reserve.
So what would it get spent on in this special revenue fund? So we can, okay, I just want to, there's money floating all over with these special revenue funds,
So
and
the
I just
special
want to,
revenue
yeah.
fund is,
But nothing really ever comes out of there for the general fund use that I'm aware of. So this is,
carry forward in
right.
the budget.
just curious that we got, just these special revenue
lost
funds
in
all over.
traffic.
Yeah, but we track them also, the special revenues, so. That's all I wanted to know.
Okay, so good old fund accounting. Governmental accounting, anybody who takes it in school,
Oh, God, I hated
it's ugly.
that. Sorry, Christina.
It's not the accrual basis, not the cash basis, fund accounting. Okay, any more discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? The consent agenda items 1 through 6 carry 6-0. The next are 8 administrative business items. First one, departmental transfer $1,100 in the general fund engineering for vehicle maintenance.
Motion to approve.
Second it.
Motion is second. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstain. Number 1 carries 6-0. Number 2 is a transfer from contingency. It's accumulated payout of $70,000 even.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion is second. Discussion?
There's not many of these left, I hope.
So with the CMERS changes that came about last year, I know the state had, they called it the gray tsunami. We're starting to experience some of that as well. We've got a lot of retirements coming down the pike. We have had some turnover. The memo that's in your packet does explain a lot of those items, but we are going to be coming back to you at a future meeting for probably some additional, because we do have a few more folks who are teeter-tottering on if they should retire or not. They're calculating the numbers based on what they're going to lose on their COLA if they don't retire. So we're expecting a few more retirements in addition to
So how many did we budget any? Sorry.
we originally budgeted $140,000.
So every employee can use their paid time off when they leave to get app to it anywhere?
So sick time, payout.
Yeah, there's 45 days. There is a cap.
Okay.
Each contract has a different cap to it.
Any more discussion on number 2? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, abstained. Number 2 carries 6-0. Number 3 is also a contingency transfer, $2,500 for Finance Department overtime.
A motion to approve.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, number 4 is a department transfer, $29,017 for Police Department vehicle maintenance.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion is second. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstained. Number 4 carries 6-0. Number 5, departmental transfer, $3,500, sewer fund, other professional services.
Make a motion to approve.
Motion second by Mr. Stanforth. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries 6-0. That's number 5. Number 6, department transfer, $55,000 overtime in the fire department.
Make a motion to approve the transfer for the fire department.
Motion is second. Any discussion?
Is this, any of this related,
I'd have to have the fire department run a specific report, but in general, that is not,
No, Jim.
You know how much we've given to the fire department overtime, Chrissy? Since, addition to the budget?
So in addition to the budget, we transferred 105,000 to date this year.
Including this?
No.
Okay, 105K and then another 55K. So that's 160K to date, additional overtime to the fire department.
And they've explained, they've had some people out on
Yeah,
disability.
2 on comp or
and,
something,
Yeah, it's easy to do.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstain? Motion carries. Number 7, appropriation. Special revenue, the ARPA grant calendar house, 99,700.
Make a
Oh,
motion to approve.
yeah.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Second.
And
Uh,
that's money in the bank, we just take it out because of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because of,
Wait a minute, I abstain on
yeah, you abstain on that one. All right, so that's,
that.
Do you still work, there? Do you still kind of do?
okay, so we pull it out. So 99,700 special revenue ARPA grant calendar house, item number 7. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Abstain?
abstain.
Yeah, 501.
Gee,
Ed abstained.
yeah.
Got
thank
let the
you.
record show. Mr. Pocock abstained. Number 8, departmental transfer.
Woke everybody.
In the general fund for planning and zoning advertising, $1,500.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion is second. Any discussion?
Did I wait?
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, favorite motion?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn at 8:40. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Meeting adjourned at 8:40. Thank you, everybody.
Chairman, I like that.